Oke semuanya, halo dan selamat datang kembali di podcast Bicara Nuklir. Let's start 2023 with a bang. We have a very marvelous narasumber hari ini, Pak Bob Effendi, COO hitungannya, Pak, Chief Operating Officer
Yo,
dari PT ThorCon
ya,
Indonesia ya.
ThorCon Power
Uh,
Indonesia, PT
ThorCon Power
ThorCon Power.
Indonesia, sorry. Ya, PT
Ya.
ThorCon Power Indonesia. Terima kasih sekali Pak Bob. Ini udah obrolan kita kedua lah ya. Kalau
Ya.
di podcast Bicara Nuklir ini sebelumnya kita ada obrolan-obrolan lain dan aku selalu menarik sih ketika ngobrol sama Pak Bob itu ya karena uh, akhirnya aku punya perspektif luar gitu kan. Karena
Ya.
orang-orang yang aku tahu yang berkaitan dengan nuklir itu ya orang-orang quote unquote orang-orang nuklir itu, orang yang belajar nuklir as their part of education gitu kan. Sementara Pak
Ya,
Bob
betul.
sendiri kan uh, sempat di podcast ini diceritain bahwa background-nya Bapak kan computer science kan,
Menurut
terus habis
Sains.
itu ke industri migas, industri hijau,
Ya.
terus kemudian ke nuklir. Pak, mungkin bisa minta tolong di refresh dikit nggak sih Pak, kira-kira apa sih sebenarnya jadi motivasinya Bapak gitu untuk terjun yang awalnya dari computer science terus ke migas terus green energy terus kemudian akhirnya settle ke nuklir gitu.
Oke, yang motivasi pertama adalah ketika saya pensiun dari oil and gas itu it's around 2012, right? So
Mhm.
saya my last position was a managing director ya. So I was quite well off ya. Very good salary gitu ya.
Mhm.
So, saya pensiun karena udah bosen juga ya. Soal saya adalah orang yang senang dengan tantangan gitu ya. So, it become mundane menurut saya karena apalagi di services company ya. The service company
Mhm.
basically you just go, provide services and yeah, you got paid gitu ya. So even though it's good paid, but for me life is not just about money. It's about challenges. It's about progressing gitu ya.
Feeling
So,
purposes gitu ya.
ya,
Ya.
unit purpose gitu ya.
Ya.
So, and 2012 juga karena saya juga ribut juga sama my CEO. Jadi akhirnya decided, so I'm not going to be working for money. I have a high purpose. So at that time, saya quit. So I start a consulting business gitu ya. So pada saat I did consulting business like any other engineer, mungkin sekarang ya sekarang. So,
Mhm.
I was trying to figure out what's, being the energy for so long gitu ya, di mana-mana macam. So, I mean, I'd like to apply, into the energy sector, right? So,
Mhm.
saya look at what is the future of energy gitu ya. So, I know that people going to be using energy all their life, all, long history, right?
Ya.
So, and at that time I didn't know because I was too focused on a project, so I didn't look at energy from a bigger perspective, right? So I was attracted to renewable energy, like any
Mhm.
other person right now, right? But this is way in 2012, before even in Indonesia people were talking about renewable energy, right? I mean,
Mhm.
people start talking about renewable energy back in 2014 after the PP 79, right?
Ya.
So I was looking at renewable energy, solar and wind, and especially biomass, synthetic fuel, right? Second generation fuel. So what I did was I went travel around Europe to learn, take courses. At the time, you have courses like in Germany, in France,
Mhm.
so in Holland, right? So I took courses at the time because nobody knows anything about renewable energy in Indonesia. So then
Mhm.
I start my consulting business. I know it's going to be climate change is going to be the dominating factor, right?
Mhm.
So then, what was surprising to me, there's two things happens. Number one, that I look at because at that time I was because for 30 years I was involved in projects, so I never look at the bigger picture, the function of energy itself, right? So
Mhm.
then I realized, even though I already realized for many many long time, but now I start to see it from the bigger picture that energy is the driver of growth of wealth. I mean, the only driver of wealth is energy. You cannot
Ya.
have wealth created without energy, right?
Mhm.
So then I realized, then when I look at the energy consumptions of Indonesia, is very low compared to other countries in the Southeast Asia, right? I mean, I was quite shocked. I mean, like, I mean,
Bangsa sebesar kita lah ya.
yeah, I mean, even we were like lower than the global average. We were lower than our neighbors, and we were lower than the global global average, both in electricity consumption and energy consumptions, right? So in electricity consumption, currently we are about 1,000 kilowatt hour per capita, and Malaysia is already reaching about 5,000 for 1,800, right? And Thailand is like 2,500, and the global average is about 3,000, right? About 3,000, and China is already 4,000. So everybody all above Indonesia. And if you look at, Malaysia is practically like 4 times higher than Indonesia in electricity consumption. In energy consumption, we have global average is about 20 megawatt hour, right? The global average. And so energy, meaning that you have electricity, you have BBM, you have fuel, and you have heating, and you have transportation for the whole energy, right? So global average is about 20 megawatt hour, and Indonesia is about 8 megawatt hour. Imagine that, 8 megawatt hour, 20 to 8. That is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Malaysia is already at 35 megawatt hour. So I mean, I was shocked. So because we've been living in Jakarta, right? So we look at Jakarta, the progress is there, the malls and everything, right? So when I look at that number, so for the past like 30 years, like back in the 70s, we are above everybody else, back in the 70s. But ever since then, so we're declining, right? And I was shocked, and I said, this is kind of ridiculous. I mean, it takes us, the prosperity level, according to UNDP, if you measure, is 0.8, right? The prosperity. We are now at 0.7. So if you look at the Human Development Index at 0.8, that's equal to around 4,000 kilowatt hour per capita, right? So we are 1,000. So in order to reach the prosperity level, the average prosperity level, the minimum prosperity level, if we are growing at 30, so we are only growing at 30 kilowatt hour per capita per year. So we need additional 3,000. Right? That translates into about 100 years, right? This is just crazy. It will takes us about 100 years just to reach a level per Malaysia. So I mean, just 4,000, Malaysia is already 5,000. So, I mean, it's like crazy. I said to myself, hey, man, we need to speed up. So we need to accelerate. And then when I look at how much capacity that we are building, that's translate to, so we are growing at 30 kilowatt hour per capita per year, right? And we are currently at 1,000. And I calculate, so for the past 30 years, we have been building capacity, installed capacity on 4.5 to 5 gigawatt per year, right? 4.5, maximum 5 gigawatts per year. So that's why the 35,000 megawatts or 35 gigawatts that was announced by President Jokowi back in 2015 never get reached, right? Why? Because maximum we can go is about 20 to 25 gigawatts, right? So I said we're too slow. Meaning, if you calculate that we need to go up, we'll need to speed up about 3 to 4 times. Meaning that we need to build capacity, installed capacity from 5 gigawatts to 15 gigawatts per year. 15, imagine that. So about 5 years, we're looking at 75 gigawatts, not 35 gigawatts, 75. So I thought to myself, how in the hell we could reach that if we can only. So I said that number one, we need of course then we build our capacity based on coal, right? So back there in 2013, so I already realized this is not sustainable with the coal thing, right? So we need to have a clean and sustainable. Back in 2013 and 14, even before the PP79 come out, I already said this has to go through nuclear, right? You build up large enough because you need a clean clean and massive scale of power plant, right? And the only thing that could close to the demand, right? And the only way to achieve this is nuclear. And then the second thing happened. That was my realization in 2013. That was my realization. I mean, I did not know anybody in nuclear at the time, right? So that was my realization in about that. Hey, we need to speed up, right? So relation is that the connection between energy and prosperity and economics. That's the first realizations, right? And the second realization is that we're growing too slow, right? We are going too flat compared to the global average, compared to our neighbors, right? That's the second realization. The third realization is when they released PP9 in 2014, right? Suddenly they put nuclear as the last options. I mean, this is just crazy. I said to myself, I mean, being in about the last 10, 15 years of my career, I've been a strategic planner, analyst, right? Analyzing energy. So when you are a planner, you don't put resources on an options, right? You just don't do that, right? It's just it's not the best practice. You don't put resources on options, right? So you put everything, what they call putting everything on the table, right? Everything on the table. So I said, this is something going on here. So that's what wakes me up. Why would they put nuclear as an option, right? So then I start investigating, right? So what I found out also that the PP9 in 2014, it's called the National Energy Policy, right? So apparently that is not the first national energy policy. So apparently back in 2007, there was the first national energy policy. I mean, that's called Perpres 5 2007. So what I was quite shocked when I look at the Perpres 5, right? Nuclear was there at 5%. There, even when you look at the lampiran, the attachment to that Perpres, which is called the blueprint for pengelolaan energi nasional. If you look at the blueprint, the first nuclear power plant stated there should operate by 2016, and the last one 2024. So there are about 4,000 gigawatts, right? So this is the crazy thing, right? So I was quite shocked when I look at that. Even they budgeted for APBN at that time. So they budgeted for APBN to build nuclear power plant back in 2000 and to be operated. This is in Energy Policy 2007, right? So I was quite shocked. And then I look at the numbers, right? They were planning for 4 gigawatts of nuclear, right? By 2025. And what more shock is that the target for EBT, right? For target for EBT in 2007 in 2025, right? The 2025 EBT targets, that's 15%. That's 15%. So 15%, imagine that, 15% EBT, right? You need 4,000 gigawatt, 4 gigawatts of nuclear power plant, right? So about 12 years later, right? In 2014, right? I mean, the EBT increases to 25%, right? 23%, and nuclear is gone. Population is increasing, consumption energy is increasing. How can it be gone? So I said, this is not, doesn't make sense, right? Right. I mean, if you look at, you don't need to have a PhD or rocket science, right? To know that this is political. Am I right? This is very political. So I delve into it, and I see that it is very political. And what quite surprises me is nobody in the nuclear sector fight for it. Nobody, literally. So they just accept it. They don't fight for it. So then I'm the kind of guy who always looking for the next fight. I'm kind of that guy. So I'm not content, right? So when I look at that three revelation, right? Number one is the connection between energy and economy. Number two is how flat we are and the consumption very low. The third is that nuclear put as the last option, right? And there is nobody in the nuclear sector fight for it, right? And it got challenged. So I said to myself, oh, this is my next fight. So back in 2014, I put nuclear to go as my next fight. And so I keep on pushing. So that's how it got started. And by 2015, I managed to get di Marves di Kementerian Maritim saat itu to set up arrange a seminar about thorium, because I found out about thorium in Bangka Belitung. So back in 2014, I look at, hey, this is very interesting fuel type, right? So I found about the molten salt reactor. So because I know that it has to be clean and cheap energy. The keyword is cheap. It's terjangkau, affordable, right? Because we are very, despite what everybody else, I mean, I'm saying that we are a poor country. I mean, we're looking at 4,000 GDP per capita. I mean, Malaysia is like 12,000 already. I mean, basically, Indonesia is an UMR country, right? If you divide like $4,000, I mean, that's like 50 million, right? So you divide that, that's practically the UMR salary in Indonesia, right? So we are an UMR country. So we nothing to be proud of, right? So because we are an UMR country, that means the energy need to be cheap, and I know it has to be with nuclear. So what I try to find out how you make nuclear cheap, because I learned from the nuclear history. Nuclear, used to be called too cheap to meter, right? So why is it too expensive now? Right, so I find out that there is other type of nuclear called molten salt reactor, right? And by using thorium, etc., I found out about the molten salt reactor experiment, and etc. So, and we have a lot of stuff. So this is the type of reactor. It was in 2014. I put that narrative to Marves. It happened to be Pak Ridwan saat itu, Ridwan Jamaluddin, just got promoted from BPPT to be one of the deputy in Maritim. So I talked to him, and he agreed. Yeah, this is interesting, Bob. So he agreed to set up a seminar. There was the first thorium seminar back in September 2015. So that was the first one. So I initiated that. And so Pak Ridwan said to me that, hey, Bob, we need to invite investor in this technology. So I did a short list of, if you remember, there's what they call the International Thorium Conference, right? The International Thorium Conference every year, and of course now there's no longer exists, I think, right? So it's going downhill. But back in 2013, they did one in San. Right, so they have this sort of like the proceeding, right? So I did a short list of the participant, and so I think it was with UGM. So we download the proceeding, right? So I did with UGM at the time in 2013, going back and forth with them. So I didn't know nothing at that time about nuclear. I just know that it has to be a molten salt reactor. So I know that Pandang, right? I learned about Pandang was, doing molten salt reactor at the time. So I consulted with him, and Pak Yudi also was, supporting Yudi Marjoko, right? So we showcased all the participants in that Thorium International Conference in CERN, and we come up with three names. So terrestrial energy, flight energy, and ThorCon Power. So we actually invite all three of them, right? Back September, but only ThorCon Power come. So only ThorCon. The other, I mean, maybe they don't see Indonesia as a potential country, right? Which is kind of stupid, I think, right? So only ThorCon came, and during the seminar, I was the moderator. So I give ThorCon the last presentation. That was in the afternoon, after Batan, after PLN, after Pertamina, everybody present. So the seminar the topic was, I think I forgot, thorium as the future energy for industrialization or something like that. So with the Ministry of Industry also. So they resign and they said, yeah, we can do electricity at 3 cents, right? And takes about 6 years, and we will invest. So suddenly we were surprised. Hey, this is very cheap, and right away PLN jumps. Hey, would you be willing to sell at around 6 cents? Yeah, we'll be willing. So that's how it got started. And I get them together to sign an MOU. This MOU was signed in Washington, D.C. And but unfortunately, at that time, the Minister of Energy, was going to go nuclear back in early 2015 by producing what they call the Buku Putih PLTN 5 gigawatts, 5,000 megawatts, right? But never get signed by the president, right? For, that's a different topics, but, that get signed and didn't push. And even at the end of 2015, Minister of Energy said, hey, nuclear is last option, so let's not talk about nuclear, maybe after 2050. I mean, this is just crazy, right? So, of course, after that press release by ASDEM at the end of 2015, so the MOU supposed to be, by all the BUMN, everybody got cold feet, they lost interest. So originally I was planning to be in the front, right? I mean, I was at that time back in 2015 when Dave Devaney, right, the CEO of ThorCon, asked me, hey Bob, we don't have anybody here. Could you help us? So like being our reps to representative to sort of like set up everybody else. I said, yeah, sure, because I was making good money as a consultant. I mean, I was pulling like 10 grand. I mean, I was pulling like 10 grand just being a consultant, doing nothing, just consulting, talking and talking, right? I mean, that's easy money. Right? Yeah, you don't have any decision making 10 grands. So I said, yeah, sure. I said, why? Because, I thought that I was like a cheerleader type of person, just cheering and then supporting, because I said, hey, there is PLN, there's Pertamina, there is Inuki, and there's PT Timah, right? So those are big names, BUMN. So I was thinking that, hey, it'll be all set. They will handle the government. I'll be just a cheerleader type of a person, right? Yay, right? I thought that thing, hooray, But unfortunately, suddenly, the after the Minister of Energy have that press release that was Sudirman Said. So everybody drops. PLN drops, Pertamina, so everybody just dropped. So it left me in the front. And because I'm a kind of guy that fights, and then I'm very committed. So, I keep on, fighting because, I said to myself, hey, I'm already at that time, I don't know, 40, now I'm 60, right? At that time, I was like, I don't know, like 50, early 50s, right? So I said, well, this is going to be my last fight. If there is a last fight in my life, this is going to be it, because it will make history. It will make people in Asia prosperity, and it will make headlines. Yeah, I don't know whether I succeed or not. That was fast forward to now. That's like 8 years later. I mean, it's come to fruition. So that's how it got started.
Yeah, and hopefully it will inspire a lot of younger generations to step up just like you in the future. And it brings up vivid memories, Pak. I remember when at the time in 2016 I was, I think, technically a junior, tahun ketiga gitu kan. I remember I came to one of the seminars in Jogja gitu kan. And here we are again. I'm still doing my PhD and you're still promoting nuclear. There has been a lot of things happening in ThorCon. I remember since last time we spoke, kayaknya Pak Bob ya. Just from the headlines, I will just run through the headlines. So you have some design training with ITB, ISDM, Bapeten Batan PLN, and also you got kerjasama with I'm sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation, but it's Empresarios Agrupados, which is an architecture firm, and also you got the SME, Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, to build the shipyard in Korea. Later, there are a lot of cooperations with BRIN, UGM, Bureau Veritas is the new one, the one that I just heard of. I think
Bureau Veritas.
Bureau Veritas, yeah.
Bureau Veritas.
Yeah, Bureau Veritas is Yeah, it's the new one that I just heard of. So yeah, what's the progress ya, Pak? From all these
Okay,
things, what's the progress?
okay, all right. So number one, actually, you got we can categorize it into two category, right? The
Mhm.
progress in the Indonesia itself and the progress internationally in the engineering side, right? That's I need to describe because it's important to know what the progress of both sides, right? Whether in Indonesia, in the political scene, and progress in the regulatory scenes, right?
Mhm.
And on the other side is the engineering preparedness, right? Both
Mhm.
have to meet, right? Both have to meet
Yeah.
because if the Indonesia doesn't open up, then it go dead end, right? So both
Yep.
have to meet and both have to be on the same timeline. Am I right? Have to be on
Yep.
the same timeline. I
Okay.
mean, I think this is what people don't realize. Matching these two timelines is the most difficult. Number one, in
Mhm.
Indonesia, you need to open up the door. And second, you need to match the timeline both in SDM and both in Bapeten. And
Yeah.
second, you need to match on the timeline with the engineering science, right? So let's talk with the Indonesian in the policy itself, right? As you know,
Mhm.
like I said before, the energy policy of Indonesia is as last option, has put nuclear as last option. So being put that as last option, practically, right? It's close the door for PLN to sign any PPA, right? And then close the
Mhm.
door for the commercialization of nuclear power plant, right? I mean, you can
Mhm.
build the reactor, the prototype, but because we are not supported by the state budget with APBN. So our business scheme is selling the electricity, right?
Mhm.
Selling the electricity. So we need to have that door open, right?
Yep.
So we've been pushing for that. I mean, luckily the break comes in 2019 when they have the new election, right? So three things happens, right? They have the new DPR, the new parliament, right? Which had in the Komisi 7 is headed by Pak Sugeng Suparwoto, and we talk with a lot of with Pak Sugeng Suparwoto, and this is like I said, right? So it's like
They have been very
the
progressive, right?
yeah,
In terms of
not
nuclear, right?
only so you mentioned that we need to have you need to have all these three parties agree on nuclear, right? You have the
Yeah.
Komisi 7, and you have the DEN also new election, the member of DEN, and you have the new minister, which is Pak Arifin Tasrif, just come into
Yeah.
the seat, right, in 2019. So you got three components need to agree on one thing. That is the most difficult, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, right, without the intervention of higher power, right? I mean, have to talk. This is intervention of higher power, right?
Yeah.
So both in the pimpinan legislation on the Komisi 7, on the chairman and the vice chairman, and they're all supporting of nuclears, right?
Mhm.
That's number one, right? The
That
second,
is solved. That is solved. Yeah. We
yeah,
got we got Komisi 7 already. And
yeah, we
then the
got
second
Komisi
one.
7 already. Yeah, the second is the DEN, right? So,
Yeah.
DEN was in 2019 early. The first batch of the new DEN was elected, by they did not get appointed because they want to reshuffle again, right? Now,
Uh-huh.
so that was like, if the first then batch was elected, I don't think we have this strong support of nuclear, right?
Mhm.
Because of it was reshuffled again. Then what happened? Pak Satya Yuda, was vice chairman of Komisi 7 before, got elected,
Mhm.
right? Strong supporters from nuclear. And then Pak Agus Puji also, from Minristek was elected again. And the third one was Pak As,
Asnasio. Asnasio Lasman.
Asnasio, which is, yeah. So and then you have other which is supported. So out of seven, I think four supported nuclear, three supported strongly, right? Especially
Mhm.
Pak Agus Puji, which is very vocal, right? So
Yeah.
suddenly, even during the when they have the fit and proper test in the DPR, Pak Satya Yuda said we need to change the narrative on nuclear from last option into viable options, right? So the words viable option, after he said that, become the narrative for nuclear. I mean, both in Komisi 7 and even in SDM, right?
Yeah.
So
Even though
that
it's a
was,
viable, but it's still progress, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it is progress, right? And then it's become a viable option in 2019. So it's still hanging, right? It's still hanging.
Yeah.
Now, the closing, actually, the closing wire, even though the new energy and new renewable energy bill, which is still hasn't been closed, right? Still hanging there. So hopefully in 2023 has put nuclear also at
In
par with
spotlight.
renewables, at par, but it has not been closed, right? So the last option clause still hanging there. I think the last component, right? So as them basically, especially Pak Arifin Tasrif is actually not against nuclear, not too pro nuclear, but not against nuclear, because he was the ambassador of Japan at that time, right?
Okay.
And yeah, he was the ambassador of Japan. And during the ambassador of Japan, several people, from Dan and from Kane, from Kane was that Pak Puji met Arifin Tasrif, and he showed his support for nuclear. He's not a opponent of nuclear, but he's not truly strong, but he believed that nuclear should be part, right? So what actually I think moved everything together is the energy crisis. The energy crisis back in 2021, right? So when it happened, right, it just blow everybody, the narrative that renewables is the key to energy transition just blow everybody minds, right? Because suddenly they realize that energy security is the key component. Actually, energy security. I mean, look at what Germany is now. I mean, Germany is considered practically climate change champion, right? I mean, climate change champion. Look at Germany right now. They are burning coal like there's no tomorrow. I mean, they're burning coal at highest record currently.
Yeah, it is sad.
Right? Currently, it's burning coal. So currently, Europe is importing coal crazy, like at for the fact it is burning coal, importing coal, right, at highest historical record, ever in history of Europe, right? I mean, where is the climate change? Where is the climate change? Where the renewables? Why cannot renewables step up, right? So before the narrative, what, hey, renewables, you can stop coal, phase out coal, and we'll change it with renewables, right? That was the narrative. But the energy crisis proven that cannot be done, right? So apparently the energy crisis shows, right, that energy security was more important than the climate change target, etc., right? I mean, the only reason now it was revealed, right, that the only reason that Europe are pushing renewables, so which they know is intermittence, right? It's because back in their back pocket they have this gas pipeline from Russia, right? They got that gas pipeline from Russia, like supporting about 40 to 50%, like almost for 50%, right, of the energy needs in Europe, the whole Europe, right? Because of that gas pipeline, then it didn't really matter whether there's no wind or there's no sun blowing, right? Even I just found out that the German has a word they call Dunkelflaute. You know what that means?
What's that mean? I don't know.
Dunkelflaute means in Germany, right? It's a period where you don't have any wind or you don't have any sun. So it's basically renewable depth zone. Renewable depth zone. So imagine, right? They know this, that every winter you have this depth zone every winter. So right, wind because of the temperatures, right, cold, and you don't have any sun because of the cloudiness, because of the cold weather, right? So you have every single winter or close to winter, you have about several months of this flouter, right? Everybody
Yeah.
knows this, right? And back in 2021, usually it's about several weeks or a month or two, right? Back in 2020, what's worse is like the what they call the perfect storm. So every single, or the Murphy's law, every single things that could get
Go
worse
wrong? It
happen,
go wrong.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like the perfect storm, right? So number one is that suddenly the economic recovery of the COVID open up, so demand goes up, right? And at that time, the primary energy was pushed down, fossil, right? So they don't have any energy, and they're expecting the gas pipeline, right, from Russia to compensate. But what happened with Russia? I think now we know that Russia is testing the water, right? Because they are trying to invade Ukraine in 2022. So this is, we're talking about 2021, right? So it was like in August. So what happened? Putin finds some excuse that they have some,
some leverage to bring, right?
Yeah, they have a malfunction in the pipeline, whatever, right? So they push the production of the gas, right? So they have less, right? Then what's worse? Okay, then we still have the wind, and what happened? Then they have Dunkelflaute, 6 months, really. They got no wind, no sun, around, approaching winter at that time for 6 months, right? So they lost. So at that time, usually the wind, just the wind, is contributing about 30%, right, to the energy capacity, right, to the electricity needs, right, about 30% in the whole Europe. At around fall of 21, this is fall of 21, they only produce about 3 to 5%. So 3 to 5%, and they lost. So the Russia usually contribute about 40%, right? So they lost about, so they only output about 20. So practically they lost about almost 50%. 50% of the energy needs in Europe, both from wind and from gas, go down. That's why suddenly they start burning coal, right? So they start burning coal. That's why coal in if you look at the numbers, in September 2021, coal price shot up to above $200. In fact, about like almost 100, about 160. Now it's about $400. Now it's about $400. Imagine it. Imagine, right, in September, there was like coal become $160, right, if I'm not mistaken. Slightly under. So this is even before Ukraine invasion. So when they said the energy crisis started because of Ukraine, they are wrong. They are wrong. So it's
earlier than that.
Way before the energy crisis. The invasion of Ukraine just make it much worse. That's it. Right. But if you look at why it happened, right? So in my opinion, it's because of two things, right? Three things. Number one, the investment in fossil fuel, right, in the past 10 years has been pushed down to flat, right? No, so there's no growth in fossil, in primary energy. You have to remember, right? Fossil is a primary energy, right? So gas, coal, and oil, right? So it has been pushed because of the ESG, right? Because of the ESG movement, right? The environmental movement, it has been pushed to kind of flat, right? Then suddenly you have COVID. So when you have COVID, the expectation was a 5-year recovery, right? 5-year recovery. So what happened in 2020, they lowered the productions. So it's already flat. So no, imagine that, yeah? So no increase in investment, meaning no increased capacity. It was pushed because globally, the world at that time was investing about $5.8 trillion on renewables, right? And the past 10 years, so imagine $5.78 trillion, and just managed to displace 1%. So $5.78 trillion just displacing 1% of the fossil fuel. Whereas in the 10 years, you don't have any investment. So, right? And suddenly in 2020, when the world opened up, right? the demand shot up. The demand keep high, right? And demand was high still, right? From 2019 to there's no increase in demand, right? But suddenly it shot up. Even it was higher than 2019, before the COVID, right? Why? Because suddenly people have more disposable income. I mean, they were going nowhere, right? They were all homes, right? Receiving salary, right? Receiving salary, and also receiving those so-called COVID incentive. Remember, every other countries give you COVID incentive, right? Suddenly, when the global economic open up, people has more money than in 2019. More money, literally more money, right?
Yeah.
So unless you get fired, right? Unless you get fired.
Yeah, that's another case. Yeah.
That's another case. So suddenly demand shot up two times above 2019, right? But what happened? Primary energy goes down. Already goes down. It can push because they were expecting 5 years, right? Then Russia cut down on the gas in preparation for the invasion, actually, right? Then what happened? Then suddenly Dunkelflaute 6 months. So bam, like I said, it's the perfect storm. It's the right recipe for energy crisis, right? So I think the worst energy crisis in the world, in history of the world, right? So because why? Because this energy crisis, not only it become an energy crisis, it become a food crisis, and it become the economic crisis. 3 crises at the same time. Never happened in the world. You got 3 crises at the same times. You get energy crisis, you got economic crisis, and you get food crisis. I mean, we still remember the energy crisis, the economic crisis, right? Economic crisis in 2008, right? Because of junk bond, everything, right? And we still remember the economic crisis of 1998, right? 1978, right? But there's no energy crisis at the time. In 2008, there's no energy crisis. Now we have 3 crises, right? You get food crisis, right? And because gas, as you know, fertilizer goes up, right? Fertilizer price is like now like 5-6 times, right? Because fertilizer need gas, right? So gas prices sounds like crazy. Gas price right now is at equivalent of the oil at $600. So if you put gas price equivalent to the oil, because people don't quite get it when they talk about MMBTU, right? So gas price currently is around equivalent to oil prices at $600 per barrel. So this is just crazy, right? This is crazy. So in order, right? In order to make fertilizers, in order to grow crops, you need fertilizer, and fertilizer need gas because you need methane to produce nitrogens, etc. Right? So methane, etc. So it's gone. It's very high, right? So you got food crisis, you get economic crisis. Never happened, right? Recession right now in Europe, in America is about like 9-10%, right? In Europe, it's about like almost 5%. Yeah. In where you are, right? It's like 9-10%. So food are going up, right? Food going up, transport going up, the shelves are empty, right? Everything is empty. So this is crazy. All of this because an absurd energy policy pushed by the ESG, by the environmentalists, what they call the energy Wende, right? It's called the energy Wende, pushed by the Germany. So now after this crisis, countries around the world, right, like UK, the French, Belgium, Sweden, Japan, South Korea, they realize that, hey, energy security is much more important. And all those countries suddenly reversed their energy policy and started putting nuclear as the backbone of their energy transition. So people still, hey, we need to do energy transition, right? To do energy transition, net zero by 2060. But before the energy crisis, the plan was to go through renewables, right? Now it's like nuclear. Even like in Japan, they restart the whole nuclear programs, and even the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, right, the new just elected Prime Minister just before the energy crisis, has stated that nuclear is going to be the backbone of our energy transition. This has never happened. That's why a lot of people talking 2023 will be the next nuclear renaissance. right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? People don't realize this, Harun. But when they talk about energy security, for example, in Indonesia, you have the coal plant. When they call energy security, basically looking at the window, how much coal there is in my stockpile, right? In my stockyard, right? You look at, hey,
Yep.
how many coal there is, right? So the number to go by is 21 days. So if you have 21 days of coal, it means you are secure, right? So it's gas, so it's oil. About 21 days. So it's everywhere wells in the world. Looking at days, 21 days, 30 days, So in order of about days or months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when like in PLN in Indonesia, when you got less than 21 days, when you got panic, right? So back even because of the high coal price in late 2021 in December, the coal price was like almost $200, right? PLN just have about 3 days of coal. 3 days, imagine that. So if that in January, so that's why they have the moratorium not to export, right? So people forget when you put that nuclear fuel into the reactor, Harun, right? Even the nuclear people don't realize the significance of this. You got about 4 years or 8 years in ThorCon case, about 8 years of fuel, right? 8 years, meaning that once you put it there, right? So for 4 years or 8 years, right? You don't talk about any fuel at all, right? It was just use that fuel. It's exactly what energy security, right? So you are jumping energy security from the order of days to the order of years, right? I mean, this is actually what realize what with all these countries in the world starting to realize, right? So nuclear is the ultimate energy security, the ultimate. I mean, it is anti-inflation, right? Because we got 4 years, 8 years of fuel, right? It's not affected by inflation, right? It's not affected by revolutions, right? In the Ukraine war, as has been proven, right? You still have this war going on, and the nuclear power plant still producing fuel, right? Is the fuel, the chain, supply chain is not affected, right? Because the fuel is already in the reactor, right? Right. So it is like people start realizing this, right? So this is what happened in Indonesia, right? The government, the SDM, then everybody starting to realize that nuclear is a must. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. That's why now the discussions, right? In the discussion with the Ministry of Energy, then, right? So they are revising the national energy policy right now, even the RUAN, the implementation, and have put nuclear, right? 8 gigawatts of nuclear power plant operated by 2040. 8 gigawatts, right? So 8 gigawatts. So if you have 8 gigawatts operating nuclear power plant commercially by 2040, so if you pull that, right? So the first one should be operating by 2032, the latest. And that timetable, the latest, right? And the latest. So that timetable match exactly as ThorCon timetable. I mean, don't ask why it got matched, right? You figure it out, but it got matched. Right? It got matched exactly to ThorCon timetables, right? Because in our plan, right, that we will be commercial by 2030. So match exactly. Right. So that's the first in the
policy side.
Side, right? So the second is in the regulatory sides in Bapeten, right? So as you know, back in 2021, that the government has, out of the omnibus law, right, Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, produces what they call the PP 5 2021, the government regulation number 5, right? So in the government regulation number 5, that's they call the permit for risk-based business, right? So they put, so it's a risk-based business, right? So they put a KBLI. So KBLI is like a permit for like SIUP, right? Like permit for to open up business, to open up working business permits, right? So they put before in the last KBLI was published in 2000 and I think it was 18, right? The last one 2018, nuclear operating nuclear power plant or nuclear power plant business was not listed. But suddenly they put nuclear power plant business in this KBLI, in the new KBLI. So the
Sorry,
government,
sorry. Is it the power plant or the mining
no, the
or
power plant.
both? Okay.
Yeah, power plant. It's just now the mining. So the mining thing is not really significant, right? It's basically Bapeten is a Bapeten regulation, basically, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about the mining. It's about the nuclear power plant, right?
Okay.
And people get confused in the media. They said, "Hey, that's a different story and has nothing to do actually for nuclear power plants." It's just that a lot of people do not understand the regulations, right? There was just purely the regulation on mining safety, because before it was under Batan, right? It was under Batan, and now the private sector can go into radioactive mining, right? So that means Bapeten need to produce a new regulation on safety on the mining, which is actually
it has been done.
It's already done, right? But it's under Batan, right? So now they put it under a private sector also. So it's not new and has nothing to do with nuclear power plant. It's just that the media, because they want to support nuclear, this is what happened, right? They want to support nuclear, so they spin it off as if the narrative, right, that this is a preparation for nuclear power plant. It's not, right?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do. It is not. But the media spin it off, right? Why the media spin? I don't know. But it's just.
I think because it's clickbait. I mean, if you talk about nuclear, everything is clickbait. Yeah.
Yeah, it's clickbait, or they are in support of nuclear. So they said in the media, hey, Jokowi is preparing for nuclear power plant. Here's the the government regulation.
Here's the sign. One of them is like building, having a regulation on mining of radioactive materials.
But it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with nuclear, actually, nuclear power plant. But what has something to do with nuclear power plant is the government regulation number 5, 2021, which the government has already put a KBLI, right? So basically, it's a KBLI is like a permit to have some business, right? So they
a
put
company permit for a company to work in Indonesia.
Yes, for foreign investment, So for local company, they call SIUP, right? Surat Izin Usaha, right? So it's like SIUP, like permit to open up a business, right? So in the last KBLI was 2018. There was no nuclear business. Now in 2021, there's a nuclear business. So if you look at the KBLI, so the government specify about commercial nuclear power plant, even all the steps need to be taken, and what's wonderful about this is finally the government put a time constraint and budget constraint. So they put how long the maximum, right? So we don't have any NRC type of regulation. The government has put, I kind of forgot, I think they put the maximum to license a nuclear power plant is about 8 years maximum. So meaning
the whole thing?
The whole
thing. Okay.
Yes, the whole thing. Starting, from the persetujuan izin, from the design approval until the commissioning is about 8 years maximum. So so the premise is if you by the 8th year or what, because they break down, right? So if you reach the limits for saying design approval, maximum is about 1 year design approval. So if by 12 months after you submitted, Bapeten has not released the design approval, it is automatically approved. So this is great.
Oh,
right?
wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Right? So it is
right.
It is automatically approved, right? So this is great. I mean, this is a certainty for investors, right? Because as nuclear regulatory body in the world that does not work like that, right? So they just work. They work we take as long as we want, right? And not only as long as we want, I don't give you quotation, right? We don't give you quotation how much it's going to cost, right?
Yeah.
So in this government regulation number 5, not only they specify the tariff, the charge that Bapeten can only charge, but also the maximum time, not the minimum. Not the
The
minimum.
maximum, yeah.
Maximum time. I mean, people don't realize this, Harun. I mean, this is a breakthrough, even in the globally, because I don't think any other regulatory body do that in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Certainly not NRC. Certainly, maybe
Definitely not NRC. Yeah.
definitely
I
not
know,
NRC,
yeah,
right?
at least I know from some of the conversations here in the US that the NRC just took it as slow as possible somehow.
Exactly. Yes. So I mean, imagine that back in 2000 and I think 12 or something. So ThorCon was trying to submit talk to NRC, right? They said, okay, we trying to do this new design, right? And they said to me, right? And then so they asked, do you have an estimate how much it's gonna cost to license this, right? And how long, right? They said the NFC guy, right? If you Google, the evidence still there. So back in 2012, they submitted this. So if you can Google NRC in their database, they still have SOCON presentation there in 2012. So the
Mm-hmm.
guy, NRC guy said, you just prepare $50 million. $50 million. Imagine that. Just
Yeah.
prepare $50 million, right? Have it in your bank account, and it'll take us minimum of 10 years, right? That's minimum. And we'll take whatever time we want. Whatever time. I mean, that's 50 million. That's not the maximum. I mean, that's the minimum. They would not start anything unless you get like $50 million. This is just crazy, right? So
Mm-hmm.
who has the right mind want to do that? Even like Bill Gates go to China, right? Now the only reason Bill Gates Terra Power come back to the US to do their reactors is because supported by DOA, the funding, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's done by through DOA money. When before the funding through DOA, like Bill Gates even going to license it in China, right? Because of that, because there's no certainty in the regulatory body, both in time or in budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Bangtan, you get time constraint and budget constraint, which is wonderful. And the third thing, actually, this is the wonderful thing. The third things, right, which is this regulation are quite breakthrough, is that they don't differentiate between prototypes and commercial reactors, right? They don't differentiate, right? So meaning the translation is that a commercial entity, a company, either company or universities, right,
Mm-hmm.
can build a prototypes, right, and then commercialize it, right, which cannot be done in the previous regulation, cannot be done. As you know, in the government regulation number 2, 2014, the prototype can only be done through Batan, right, which is now BRIN, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, meaning that, of course, this from prototype to commercial, it's not new. I mean, like in the US, it's like that, right? I mean, you can build prototype and you can commercialize it, right? But in
Definitely.
Indonesia, right? Definitely, right? Any other thing, in the world, it's like that, right? So, but in Indonesia, as you know, this is brand new, right? So with these three new regulations, basically, Bapeten open up the door for us, and because of this, it's also free ThorCon from the polemic of discussion of nuclear power, right now, because there's still polemics, right? Why? Because we are doing a prototypes, right? When you are doing prototypes, meaning, right? So all the polemics, all the pro and cons of nuclear power is on commercial nuclear power plant, which is called PLTN, right? So that's commercial nuclear power plant. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So its polemic is commercial nuclear power, but they don't have a polemic on the prototypes, on the experimental reactors, right? So according to the regulation, is like, you remember back in like 3-5 years ago, Batan was proposing RDA, the HTGR, for what they call the experimental power
research
reactor.
Yeah.
No, experimental power reactor. The keyword is power reactor. So it produces electricity, it produces but do not sell it commercially. So they're going to use it internally. So they call the RDA, right?
Yep.
So it's called experimental power reactor, right? So I mean, so basically what this means, right? Before it was only can be done by through button, right? Experimental power reactor. So you don't sell the electricity. It produces electricity, but you don't sell it, right?
Just
You
proof
don't
of concept, basically. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, you just use it internally, right?
Yep.
So what's this translate into? Meaning, ThorCon, right? There was back in 2014, and back then the PP number 2 just considered a experimental reactor under 10 megawatts, right? But fortunately, there is no specification, there is no specific numbers in the regulation back in even in the Undang-Undang Nuklir, in the Nuclear Act, or in the PP number 2 or the PP 5. So meaning, right, an experimental reactor can be like 2 megawatts, 3 megawatts, 10 megawatts, or 250 megawatts. It does not matter. The regulation does not differentiate, right? So meaning that we can build an experimental power reactor, ThorCon experimental power reactor, without going into the pro and cons and the polemic of this PL10, right? Just with Bapeten, just with Bapeten. So Bapeten understood this, right? So just like how when Batan, did you know the significance of this, right? I mean, people don't really get the significance of PP5, right? So practically, what I'm trying to say, ThorCon can be built, right? Can be built, literally can be built, right? Because we are commercial. We plan to commercialize it or sell the electricity by 2028, right? So for, let's say, we start, submitting for the approval for Bapeten for design license back in, let's say, 2024, right? So we got 4 years of just doing with Bapetens only, right? Without going into the polemic of pro and cons, because we are doing a experimental power reactor. So the keyword is experimental power reactor. So when we get license for experimental power reactor, right, then we resubmit as a commercial reactor the exact same thing, the same unit, right? The same unit, right? The same unit. We just change the reactor, resubmit it as commercial reactor, but then go through the licensing process, maybe another 1-2 years. We run it as baseload, then bam, we got the license, right? For commercial operation. I mean, this is just practically open up the door, right? Open up the door. And we have a discussion with Bapeten the end of the year, last year, and we propose to start a pre-licensing process in early 2023. In early 2000, and Bapeten agrees to start the pre-licensing process, and we agree also the pre-licensing process is not the pre-licensing process which happened like in Canada, which take 3 years. So the pre-licensing process that so the pre-licensing process that we propose is only 1 year. So like in preparation for the actual. So it's not like based on the Canadian pre-licensing methodology or based on the pre-licensing of any country. So it's a very short, and it's preparation for both, right? So both Bapeten and ThorCon. So I cannot divulge what's the term of reference. Basically, we're doing some preparations, but wait, we're going to do right now we're discussing in the term of reference, because the term of reference and the objective is not locked yet. We got some understanding, right? The basic understanding that is not the same as the Canadian or the IAEA. It's our own pre-licensing process, right? Even though later Bapeten agreed that in the revised Nuclear Act, they're going to revise it, and PP2 also they're going to revise it, right? So they're going to include the official pre-licensing process. So now it's unofficial. So we need to sort of like work around the regulations, but both agree we need to have a preparation, because the target we start going. We're going to start somewhere around early 2023, right?
All
So
right.
this year we're going to start this year, and hopefully within the next 14 to 16 months from now, right? 14 to 16 months, we are going to start the official submission of our license, the official. So we're going to
Okay.
officially submit the application for the licensing process in about 14 to 16 months. So that's the from the regulatory body.
Okay,
And
Pak Bob. Really sorry. I have a few follow-ups on this before we move on
okay,
to the engineering sides gitu ya. So first up, how confident it is for ThorCon to like having dealing with our Bapeten, which has
yeah,
we have to be frank, they have no experience to license a commercial
mm,
nuclear power plant.
yeah,
And what you said earlier is we are trying to have it as an experiment first. We have a license for experiment first, then we can scale it up into a commercial reactors. But both of them are basically a power reactor, which Bapeten has never been licensed before.
yeah.
So how confident you are with them? That's the first one. And also, do you think it is it gonna be a tiring process to be I mean, even in the world, your technology, the technology that you are proposing is
Mm.
can be categorized as new technology.
Mm.
So and it is even more difficult for Bapeten because they don't have any benchmark to license to how to license an MSR before. So how confident you are with the technology itself and how confident you are with our regulatory process.
Well, number one, you are underestimating Bapeten itself, right? So let me ask you a question.
Mm,
Does the Bangladesh has an experience in, licensing a commercial nuclear power plant? They don't. Does UEA have experience in licensing operating commercial nuclear power plant? They don't. They don't even have a research reactor, the UEA, right? So, but they did it, right? They have three operating already, three reactor. I mean,
mm,
this is huge. Like you got like
mm.
1,000 megawatts of reactors, 1,000
Yeah,
megawatts, right? So, I
yeah.
mean, that's the wrong question to ask, because you can do what they call the technical support organizations, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
hire, but can hire organization like the UEA. I mean, they make their own Bapeten, right? They call it FRNC, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then like 90% of the employee is like expat,
Yep.
like close to 90%, right? So
Yep.
of course Bapeten will not do 90%, I'm quite sure, right? But what they
Mm-hmm.
do, what they call the TSO, technical support organization, right? They can hire experts from all over the world, and they could
Mm-hmm.
call upon IAEA to help them, right? Which is what they are preparing right now. So
Yep.
I mean, that's not an issue, I think. I mean, you need to look
Okay.
at the Bangladesh and UEA for that matters, right? So that's
Okay.
practically not an issue that they don't have experience, because other country also doing the first kind that they don't have an experience, right? So we have about 50 years of experience, right? Of a reactor operating experimental reactor and research reactor.
Mm-hmm.
The second issue is that, again, right, then they can hire not only from IAEA, but also from a expert in molten salt reactor all around the world. I mean, there are a lot of molten salt reactor. That's the first one. The second one is
I
that
mean, so yeah,
yeah.
sorry. No. I mean, sorry. Continue first. I think.
Okay. The
Okay.
second one is that we have this 1 year of preparation, right? So this whole 1 year
Mm-hmm.
of preparation is going to be needed by Bapeten to evaluate what kind of human resources they need, what kind of
All right.
tools they have. So this 1 year of preparation is basically needed for both sides, right? So
Okay.
right, needed for both sides, and we've been doing as you know that we've been trying to sort of like get Bapeten at pace, understanding the design for since last year, right?
Yep.
And every month, once a month, we have a Zoom call with the headquarters, with the head office, to explain about the design. So Bapeten, trying to speed up the process.
All right.
And the last one is that also that we're going to build the non-fission test reactor, non-fission test platform, which is we call the NTP, that's going to be built in the end of next year. So the end of this year. So by that time, Bapeten will know this is the NTP, right? So the NTP basically is a one-to-one reactor, exactly the same size of reactors, right?
Yep.
The same size of reactor, but we'll heat it up with electricity, with heater, right? And the basic design is there, and the thermodynamics is there, the same, but the secondary exchange is, so we push it down because we're going to be heating up only to 10 megawatts of thermals of electricity. So Bapeten, and the safety features, going to test the safety features, right? So Bapeten has also that time to study the type of reactor, physically looking at the reactor itself.
All right.
So we have confidence, right? We have confidence in that. So the other thing is also, right, that we've been evaluated, as you know, that we also sign contract with Empresario Agrupados, right? Empresario Agrupados Internationals, and we submit. In fact, Empresario Agrupados is actually the one that do the master planning. So they're going to plan. So what they do is also they're planning, so how to speed up the understanding with Bapeten, so to break down everything, right, to make it more understandable, right? The second is that so they are the plan. They're one that, so part of the pre-licensing process is the timeline, right? You need to have a timeline. So what we call the R1, right? Now R1, we have going to submit the R1. Bapeten has already see our R1, right? Preliminary review of our R1. Through the preliminary review of the R1, they say it's within their confident level. They are confident, right? So then we go through the pre-licensing process. Through the pre-licensing process, we have a discussion between ThorCon, Bapeten, Empresario Agrupados, and DV, the Bureau Veritas, and ThorCon designers, everybody else there. So what they're going to do is, part of it, right, is revising the R1 into R2, right? So to meet up with Bapeten schedules, right? So then we have an R2, which is the sort of like the implemented timeline. So the R1 is the roadmap of the timeline according to the engineering preparedness, right? So then the R2 become the engineering plus the licensing preparedness. So not the licensing process, but the licensing preparedness, right? So Bapeten going to put their own preparedness there, right? Including the timeline one, right? So then you become the R2. So what you're asking, actually what's happening is going to be happening in 2023. Bapeten is going to be speeding up, because according to the regulation, when somebody submit, right? When somebody submit a permit, this is not just Bapeten, for any other regulatory body, right? That regulatory body, right, need to be ready at whatever cost. Otherwise, if we submit, right, for example, if we submit to Bapeten, right, for example, like tomorrow, and Bapeten go through our application at full complete, 100% complete, and Bapeten say, oh, sorry, we are not ready, then we can sue Bapeten. You know that we can sue them. And then they said, oh, sorry, ThorCon, we are not ready yet. Please submit maybe in 2 years, 3 years time. No. You can sue them. You can sue. This is according to the law. So whether or not, right, Bapeten ready, they need to be ready, otherwise they get sued. Right? And Bapeten knows that, and that's why they are preparing. That's why they're agreeing on the pre-licensing process. So this is the wonderful thing about the omnibus law. We can sue the government, we can sue the regulatory body if they are not performing, or even they are holding it back, right? We can sue them, right? Right. So what you're saying is not funded. Actually, we are confident, and so of course, that's why we do the R2 the R2 is we try to meet up what Bapeten needs and what are the preparation that Bapetens need to do, and including the whole licensing process too. So we don't see any problems. So that's why we have this licensing process. So they could prepare accordingly, right? The third one is because this is a non-pressure, it's very simple. I mean, operating a molten salt reactor, as you know by theory, right? It is much simpler than a PWR, LWR, of HTGR or sodium, in more simpler. I mean, this is the simplest. I think, by this time, right, I should know. I mean, I consider myself an expert, not as like you, but I know all the design, right? So I think it is the simplest type of reactor to operate, the simplest. So in fact, when I was talking back in 2017, right, 2017, I was going to IAEA for the first MSR technical meeting, right? The first MSR technical meeting in IAEA back in 2017. Yeah, I think it was 17. And the guy who heads the MSR technical meeting was an HTGR guy. I forgot the name, the big guy, forgot the name of the guy. So he was the head of the HTGR group, right?
Oh,
so
Dr. Friedrich Ritzma?
Friedrich Ritzma, exactly.
Oh, Friedrich Ritzma, yeah.
Right. So he's an HTGR guy, right? He's from South Africa, HTGR guy. In fact, now he's no longer in IAEA. He goes to private sectors, right? So I got a.
He's going to USNC actually.
What?
He's going to USNC actually.
Okay, well, that's good. So when I asked him, right? So I asked him at that time in that forum. There was like Ritzma bosses at that time, right? So I forgot his name, like the head of the nuclear energy. So I said, right, I said to him, right, if I think if nuclear going to prosper, if nuclear going to have a growth, right, it will be in the developing country. It will not be in the developed country. It will be in the developing country. So the only way nuclear is going to prosper and to develop, right, to have growth, industrial growth, right, and it has to be, this is our resurrection. It has to be in the developing country like Indonesia, Africa, Asia, right? So I said to them, there's only two requirements. I said to develop in the developing countries, right? Number one, you need to be able to be cheaper than coal or competitive with coal, right, at price. Second, you need to be, you need to have a very simple reactor. It's very simple reactor. If you have a very complicated reactor, then only countries that have high GDP, that etc., right? So those are the requirements. I said. So I'm telling this openly in the forum, right? Even with the directors of nuclear energy. I said the only thing I said, right? I'm not an expert in nuclear, but I spent long enough in nuclear to understand that the only reactor that meet these two requirements is the molten salt reactors. No other reactor is low pressure. That means the fabrication is very cheap, right? The second is because it's low pressure, is error free. It's like human can have no error, and operator can do no wrong, right? It's practically error free, human error free. So it's very simple to operate, right? So that's the only reactor. I told them, right? You tell me, anybody here in the room, right? Tell me if there is other reactor that meet this requirement, cheap and simple to operate. Right? That's my question. Nobody answered, Harun. Nobody answered, right? Then after the meetings over, was like lunch, right? Friedrich Ritzma come to me. I said, hey, Bob, I agree with you. Those two questions, those criteria, only molten salt reactor. And then I said, what about HTGR? You know HTGR. Oh, Bob, HTGR is very difficult to operate. Very expensive, even more expensive than PWR. Very hard to operate, very complicated to operate. So you are right. The simplest to operate is molten salt reactors. That was in 2017, Harun. And back then later in 2019, I think, and then my statement was quoted. If you go through the IAEA website, right, because I told to Frederick, right? I told to Frederick, hey, Frederick, why don't you say that, right? Back in the forum, right? I said, I can, Bob. I mean, I'm an IA guy. I cannot say that like that. We need to be objective. Okay, right? I mean, but you understand that's the fact, right? Yes, I understand that's a fact. So what happened was that he asked the IAEA media to interview me, right? So I was interviewed, right? And I said about these things, these criteria: simple to operate and cheap and suitable for developed country, and it's still there. If you Google my name, molten salt reactor, and Indonesia, it's still. I mean, I think I'm the only non-Batans people to be quoted in the news in IAEA website. I think I'm the only one, right? So then in 2019, right, 2019, IAEA, no, I think 2020, during the height of the pandemic, during the COVID, make a webinar, right? So on the MSR, right? And guess what the title is? The title is MSR as a game changer in the nuclear industry. And then if you define what they define as game changer, exactly those two things, right? Cheap, right? Safe, very safe, and simple to operate.
Yep.
They consider, and then I look through what they term game changer, only MSR, no other type of reactor. So I think now Bapeten also understood the same why IAEA understood, right? It's a game changer, right? I think that's why currently, right? If you look at currently all the MSR developer, you got the Copenhagen Atomics, you get Seaboard, everybody else, right? So they all focusing in Asia. They're all focusing. I met them in the seminar, right? They're all focusing in Asia. And when I asked them, they're all focusing on competitive with coal. They're all focusing on competitive with coal. Yep. Simple to operate, the same, right? I mean, so I'm saying to you is that what you're saying is not correct, right? MSR is very simple to operate, right? And that's why Bapeten understood that. They understood that it is simple, right? And then we got 1 year, we got the NTP, etc., etc., and that's why they are confident. If they are not confident, Harun, if this Bapeten not confident, then they would not engage us. They would not engage, and they would not agree to do the pre-licensing, because they agree to do the pre-licensing with the consequences that we do this 12 months and the 14 months or 16 months, we're going to start the licensing process. So they go by that schedule, right? All right. So we are confident to answer your question. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Probably another one regarding before we get to the engineering part. So first, probably to be fair, when you mentioned about Bangladesh, United Arab Emirates, and Turkey, they are all building PWRs. Which have benchmarked in other countries how to do so.
No, and that's why the regulator do not have experience, right? Your thesis before your question, Pak Bob, Bapeten do not have experience, right? That's your questions. What my answer is that so does Bangladesh do not have experience, so does UEA. So you have to differentiate between no experience and design, right? Those are two different questions. Design and experience. Yes, they are based on a proven design, true, right? But not the Barakah, right? This like experimental, like first of a kind, even though it's a PWR, but it's a first of a kind design by the South Korea, right? But the regulator is practically brand new, right? Right. So that's my point. You said Bapeten do not have experience. What I'm trying to say, experience can be bought. Experience can be higher. So that's my point.
All right. Okay. And one other question that I come up with regarding this regulatory side is, I think probably why I seem so pessimistic with Bapeten is probably because I saw the engineering side of it. Yeah. I mean, having studying about nuclear reactors generally, I kind of figure out why they say it's not as simple as it's said, even though I actually want to argue with you about the thesis like the molten salt reactor is the easiest one to be
Mm.
operated because it uses a molten salt as a fuel. I'm not sure, but as far as I understand, when you are using a fluid fuel,
Yeah.
then you have to be careful with reprocessing. And so the proliferation parts that comes with it, and how do you separate some other isotopes and the things. But I don't think it's a question that you have to answer because I
Mm.
think it's more on the regulatory part, it's more on the engineering side of it that should be
Mm.
addressed by Babatan, in my opinion. And
Mm.
I want to understand this new regulatory kind of thing that is proposed by Babatan for 8 years. You have to have the license already, and you mentioned about the pre-licensing. Does this pre-licensing thing includes the 8 years of it?
No, no, does not include. It's
Okay,
include the official
okay.
licensing process. No, of course,
So
doesn't include. Yeah, does not include.
okay, so there is no, what is it? There is no like official official black and white uh agreement between Bapeten and ThorCon is saying that okay, we started the licensing from the pre-license. It just for now it's just an informal discussion, right?
No, 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 no. You don't understand the regulation, right? The
Mm-hmm.
regulation stated, right, that you have the rights to have a consultation. That's a
Okay.
regulation,
Okay.
right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So understood that. So this pre-licensing basically is a consultation, right?
All
So
right.
we have the rights to have. That's even in the regulation in the Nuclear Act. It is regulation in the PP number 2, the consultation, right? So you have the rights to have a consultation, right? So this is,
Mm-hmm.
consider it very simply. Don't make it very complicated, Harun. This is basically a consultations, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it's not defined how consultations should be made. It's not defined
Yeah.
whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. That's not defined, right?
Okay.
So it's basically a consultation, right? So we just call it a pre-licensing process, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
Bapeten would call it a pre-licensing consultation period.
Okay. All right.
So no
Yeah, that's
problem.
what that's
It is covered by regulation. It is covered.
yeah, this is what I'm trying to ask because the definition of pre-licensing has a very different meaning in NRC. And
I
I
already said that, right? That's why I already
yeah,
said in the
it's very
beginning, right?
different in NRC. Yeah.
Well, deny said that. That's Bapeten do not want to use the definition of licensing back in NRC or IAEA or Canadian, right? I not say that.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I did say that, right?
Uh-huh.
And Bapeten agreed to do this, but without the same definition, right? Because
Okay.
that definition is not covered by the regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Even if Bapeten want to do it, right? Even if Bapeten wants to do it, like the NRC type of the pre-licensing process or the
Mm-hmm.
Canadian type of that is not covered.
All right.
That is one that's not covered by the regulation. But the
Mm-hmm.
consultation, quote unquote, it's covered. The word
Yeah.
consultation is there, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
that it's vaguely, there is no definition. What's the output of the consultation? What's the process? How long does it take? Right? So it's open to interpretations, right?
All right.
That's why Bapeten going to formalize in the next revisions, right? This whole pre-licensing process in the new revision of the PP number 2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. I think it's pretty clear enough for now,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
we can start talking about the engineering side.
Okay. Well,
I
there's another side that we have a lot of studies, right? So we got a lot
mm-hmm.
of studies. Number one, right? So I'd like to share is that we for the past 2 years, right? In the past 2 years, we've been doing studies that required by the government, right? So we
Oh,
have a recommendation by the government, by the Minister of Maritime, to do basically what the Minister of Maritime is saying is that, hey, ThorCon, do these studies and put it this study, propose us, and we consider it to, because we're asking a presidential decree, right? Presidential regulation, right? To
okay.
cover the project, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then, yes, we consider it, but, submit a proposal, do these studies. Right? Among the studies are the feasibility studies, right? High-level safety assessment, and public perceptions, and the local contents, right? So we've been doing these studies for the past 2 years. For the past 2 years, our spending was about 50 billion rupiah. So about 50 billion. So about, I don't know, $4 million, right? So, I mean, that is very high. I mean, I think we are the only company in Indonesia that spend money on nuclear, literally, seriously. You know,
Relative to Indonesian business, it is too much.
Yes, I mean, 50 billion rupiah. Imagine that. So what that 50 billion rupiah have got us is, number one is a feasibility studies. You know, feasibility studies, grid study, and demand study by the PLN engineering, right? So that's like almost 2,000 pages long. I mean, very thick books, right? So that is actually the first feasibility. Well, even though Batan done feasibility, but is mentioned no feasibility, nuclear power plant feasibility studies that I've looked at, right? So we done the feasibility study, and we did the preliminary site study. We drill. So we did everything in the site, in the remote island sites. So we did the pre-feasibility, the pre-site study, right? Pre-site study, and we done that, right? And we done the demand study, and the conclusion is yes, there is a demand. And we did the economic of the study, and the conclusion is yes, this is feasible and bankable. Yes, it can be electricity can be sell profitably with a positive internal rate of return to ThorCon at around 6 cents, right? So all positive, and yes, the island that will be implemented, the remote island, about 32-kilometer offshore Bangka, is also feasible geologically. Now, in fact, we have submitted to Bapeten the pre-site study to Bapeten to get sort of like a approval on the site, not the permit, the site permit, but approval kind of also never been done. So it's like discretion to Bapeten, so that they would say yes, this is look good, right? Recommendation, you can say recommendation looks good, and continue to the next phase. So the next phase will be much more expensive because we need to put sensors there to record wind and everything real time there, right, for about a year, right? So we've done that, right, and we're about to go to the next phase. And so that we done that feasibility studies, right? And the second is that we've done also the high level safety assessment. So the key word is high level. So the high level safety assessment is not a licensing process, right? It's not a licensing process. It's just that the government want to see whether this type of reactor can have a INES level 7 accidents and survive it, right? Without any release of radiation, whatever INES level 7, right? Whether it's a Fukushima type, a tsunami, earthquake, or volcano, whatever so we did that study with UGM, right? And with Empresario Agropados. As I've told, Empresario is a nuclear company, is engineering. They have experienced more than 50 years doing nuclear engineering, right? So they are reputable nuclear engineering company in Spain, right? In fact, Empresario Agropados was the company that the European Commission contracted after the Fukushima. When after the Fukushima, right, happens, so the European Union hire Empresario Agropados to inspect and all the nuclear power plant in Europe, the whole Europe, you're looking at many nuclear power plant to have recommendations on what need to be done so that Fukushima does not happen to that reactors, right? So they use the same methodology that they used to inspect, back in 2014 or 12 or 13, with the Fukushima Commission, type of a contract with the back then, to inspect for the Fukushima accident-prone recommendation, right? So they use the same methodology, and together with UGM, and they finish the study and now submit to Bapeten. We done that, right? Submitted to Bapeten. And now Bapeten is going to evaluate them, and then hopefully if it is positive, Bapeten is going to give recommendations, right, to the government. Of course, through, that recommendation doesn't mean that we are meaning that it's passed the license, or we need to go through the licensing process, right?
It's just for the presidential decree.
Government. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just for the presidential decree, right?
Okay.
So it doesn't mean Bapeten approve on it. It's just recommendation that it meet all the requirement, right? Safety standards, and it can withstand the INES level 7. So the third one, which is I think is a breakthrough, is that the fuel lab, molten fuel lab in ITB, that's going to be commissioned in February. We've been discussing it more than 2 years, and we've been trying to set up, because this is also the first one, right? Now this design is also, I think, the first one in the world, right? That we have this type of a lab, right? So it started back in Wisconsin, University, the experiment for the separation for the fuel from ThorCon. Then it got transferred to Virginia Tech University. So parallel between Virginia Tech University and UC Berkeley Engineering, nuclear engineering, we contract them out for past 2 years. And so they have done that study, they have done the experiment, so they can separate and purify the fuel that we're going to use up to 2 kilograms, right? So they take ITB, right? So this is a breakthrough, right? ITB took the data, the experiment, the methodology that the Wisconsin University of Wisconsin, Virginia Tech, and UC Berkeley come together, and then upscale it to 20 kilograms from 2 to 20 kilograms. And we find out there are a lot of challenges in the engineering side in scaling up to 2 kilograms, right? So 2 kilograms, right? To scale up to 2 kilograms. And we done, and we already concluded how we gonna do this, and we build up the lab, and hopefully in February is going to be commissions, right? The lab, right? And the target of this lab, we're going to, the second phase would be after we succeeding in the 2 kilogram, we're going to upscale it to the pilot plant. So that's 2 tons
of molten salt.
Yes, molten salt, 2 tons per batch, right? Oh, sorry, 20 tons, not 2 tons, 20 tons of molten salt.
Will there be fuel on it?
Huh?
Will there be uranium?
Yes.
So it will be heavily guarded by Bapeten then.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So Bapeten's already, we engaged Bapeten already, but that's not yet, right? Still the future. Bapeten's already know that. IAEA also, we follow all the regulation, Harun, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say we follow all the regulation, right? And so we're going to build the 20 tons pilot project in ITB also, and that was the end. So the idea is of this pilot at the end of those pilot project is we're gonna have a engineering design for the factory of the molten fuel lab, and the factory hopefully will be built by the state-owned company, not us. So we're going to propose state-owned company, including the business plan and the front-end engineering design, everything. So hopefully the fabrication of the fuel fabrication is going to be built hopefully in 2024, and that will produce about 80 to 100 tons per batch. That will be that will fuel the non-fission test platform. So so that is wonderful. I mean, this is a breakthrough also. I mean, that when we, it'll be press release commissioned by I think in February. So that's that. The other issue is that also, as you know, the government has already given clearance that put aside that for 8 gigawatts, right? By 8 gigawatts of nuclear power plant to be in 2040, meaning, like I said before, by 32 is need to have the first nuclear power plant operating. Now, this is the basis for Bapeten to do the preparations, right? Because government is moving forward, and also because we are doing the prototypes, right? But based on that, also the Dan and the Minister of Energy put forth a sort of like a recommendation what needs to be done. There are 7 directives by the Minister of Energy, and the 7 directives is that they ask about PLN to start negotiating on the price of the nuclear power plant with any investor. So any investor would be ThorCon, the only investors, and have a preparation for the implementation of nuclear plant. So based on that directive, we can hopefully we start the negotiation, or we start an MOU with PLN Indonesia Power. It's going to involve Indonesia Power. So early 2023, hopefully by February, we're gonna see several things. I think announced. We're going to see Bappetan's going to do press conference with ThorCon, announcing the recommendation. Hopefully, it will be positive on the high-level safety assessment, and also on the pre-licensing, that we agree to start the pre-licensing. On that will be on the same. And then second press conference would be with ThorCon, PLN, and Indonesia Power. Hopefully, that's we're going also to do the preparation. So that's on the Indonesian side. I mean, there's a lot of things happening also, but will take too long. But what I'm trying to say is everything in Indonesia is converging. So converging to a point, right? Converging to a point that that literally match up with ThorCon timeline. Of course, there are a lot of challenges, Harun. I mean, you're building the first nuclear power plant. I mean, there's no challenge. There's it'll be crazy, right? Of course, there's
challenge, it is literally harder than a rocket science. By the way,
well, there are challenges, right? We are all smart, right? We are all smart, and we all if you don't face a big country for challenge, then it stay small, right?
A
country become big by taking up challenge, right? A country become big by taking up challenge. And I see, I mean, I'm 60 years old, so I see all of a lot of businesses happen, right? A lot of project, right? I mean, this is going to be the biggest challenge in the Indonesian history, and you cannot be pessimistic. I mean, we just have to be very optimistic and go for it, right? Go for it. I mean, it's going to be in Indonesia, it's called keroyokan. It's like everybody goes in there, everybody. Right. So it's going to be in international effort. It's not going to be just we ThorCon and Bappetan. Bappetan is going to ask for help for IAEA. Even they for other private company, to support them in technical support organization. So that's the bulk. Basically 2023 will be the determining years for ThorCon and Indonesia for that matters.
And we can say we start 2023 with a bang, literally with a bang.
Exactly. So
there will be a lot of movements, and I think the word converging is very fitting in this kind of situation, because there has never been a period where the government, the legislative, and the research council basically are agreeing to a certain point where nuclear is definitely non-inevitable.
Yes,
exactly. I've never seen that in my lifetime. I'm pretty sure it's not in your lifetime too. So
no, never.
Exactly. So it is definitely.
That's why, Harun, like I said, right? It's all happened for a reason. It's all happened for a reason. I mean, I cannot say anything then. Okay, I done my best. I push, right, with all my resources. But without the higher power intervention, I have to say, I mean, there is a higher power intervention in making this happen, right? Making this happen. I mean, without that intervention, because the other thing that I cannot explain, that just happened, just happened.
And everything is somehow lining.
So we just need to believe that it is takdir in Islam, right? It is takdir. This will happen. I'm definitely saying this will happen. It's takdir, inshallah.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. That's what the West said.
Yes.
Really thankful to have Pak Bob here. As always, you always deliver the most agreeing points that can always motivates me personally, and hopefully all the listeners. And yeah, thank you, Pak
One
Bob.
last point, Harun. I haven't discussed about the engineering preparedness, right?
Okay,
So
okay.
three things. Number one, you read about the Emperor Agapades, right? Let's say in any engineering, right? Any engineering project, you need to have three elements, right? You need to have three elements. Number one, you need to have the what they call the uh, konsultan perencana, which is the consulting master planning. You know, the plans,
Yep.
everything, right? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
we have that, right? We have that.
Okay.
The Empresa Agrupadas, which is doing right now the master planning and the
All right.
preparation. So because we are not experienced, right? And we
Definitely.
have the design, so that we submit the design to them, and they based on that design they plan, and also they're doing the engineering for the design, right? The engineering, the final engineering works, the detail engineering. And the second component is you need to have an EPC, right? The EPC, who is your main EPC, right? Because the master plan will be given to the EPC, right? Right, for
Mm-hmm.
construction, right? As you know, we
Yep.
already pick our EPC. That would be Daewoo Shipyard and Marine Engineering, right? They
Mm-hmm.
already agree, right? And our reactor will be built by Dosan, right? Dosan is a manufacturer of reactors. They make the reactor for the Baraka and
All
NuScale
right.
and I think AP 1000, right? So they are very
Mm-hmm.
experienced making reactors.
All
So the
right.
reactor going to be built by Dosan, and the superstructures is going to be built by Daewoo, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
last one actually is the supervising consultant. The last one you put in is the supervising consultant. So when they start building, you have to have independent consultant that you hire. They make sure, right, that it's meet all the criteria and the standards, right? The
All right.
quality management standards, right? That is
Mm-hmm.
Bureau Veritas, right?
Oh,
Now
okay.
that is Bureau Veritas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Bureau Veritas is a well-known, that's like 100 years old company, right? Started as a marine classification, right? Marine classification. So because we are a vessel, also a tuck on a vessel, right?
Mm-hmm.
On marine vessel, that means it need to be classified as marine, right? So
Okay.
when we choose, right, you have several renowned world-class marine classification. You got the Bureau Veritas, of course, one of the biggest, and
All
you
right.
got Lloyd Register, and you got DMV, and you got several,
Mm-hmm.
I think, the four biggest. So I think Bureau Veritas is number two, the biggest, right? But and between Bureau Veritas and DNV and Lloyd Register, they have experience. They have experience in acting as a nuclear engineering supervising body, quality management
All right.
services company, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but among the three, Bureau Veritas has the highest number experience in nuclear, the highest
Okay.
number. Right. So that's why we choose Bureau Veritas. Not only they got the number two in the world, I think number one. Sorry, number one in the largest marine classification, but they also have the highest number of nuclear experience. Right.
All right.
So I think most of that France has the highest number of nuclear power plant operating in Europe. Right. All of
Mm-hmm.
them, all of them is supervised by Bureau Veritas.
Okay.
But so Bureau Veritas has agreed, right, to do this with ThorCon. So not only we going to classify as vessel with Bureau Veritas, but they're going to
Mm-hmm.
be acting as our internal inspectors, for the
Okay.
quality management. So what
Mm-hmm.
this means is Bureau Veritas is the one that going to be hand in hand with Bapetens. So
Okay.
because meaning that they are our own internal regulatory body, right? Our internal inspector, right? Because they are
Mm-hmm.
independent. So they are not involved in the design. They are not involved in the master plan
Okay.
as in. So that's what we hire Bureau Veritas for, and by knowing that we also already hire, because for example like this, because the reason when we sign a contract, meaning that we need to give the design to Bureau Veritas, right? Not only to
Mm-hmm.
Bureau Veritas, meaning also to Empresario Agropados, right? I mean,
Yep.
just think logically, right?
Mhm.
Bureau Veritas or Empresario Agropados would not agree, especially Bureau Veritas, right? Would not agree on this task if they see this is still a long way to go, right? I mean, if it's still
Yeah.
like 5 years from now, why would they agree to sign contract with ThorCon, right? So
Mhm.
the only way, because we've been discussing Bureau Veritas for the past like 1 year, it's just never on surface. Now it's being published, right? So they've
Okay.
been reviewing our design for about almost a year, and they are
Okay.
very excited to start this. Not only because this is going to be the first molten salt reactor, also this is their first experience in a what they call the gravity-based power plant. As you know, this is not floating, right? So this is
Mhm.
what they call the gravity-based platform. So this is the
Okay.
first time that they involve in nuclear power, but in the water, right? They don't have that experience yet. As you know, the Russian nuclear power plant, the floating nuclear power plant, is not by Bureau Veritas, so they don't have experience. So this is the
Okay.
first time for them. So they're very excited also. So by knowing that, meaning that, without you knowing the design, meaning that we are close to the engineering design, right? We are close to engineering design. In fact, like I said, right, in the next 14 to 16 months from now, we are going to submit the licensing process to Bapeten through the first design approval. So when we start the design approval process, meaning we have to have the engineering design ready by that time.
Mhm.
So I think that's, my closing statement.
Yeah, and we
Hmm.
might have to be optimistic about this, I guess.
Yes.
So because it's not only that this will be the first MSR, commercial MSR to be built in the world, in the freaking world, but also some of the highest minds of
Yeah.
engineering and safety are
Yeah.
in the middle of this construction. So it should be a thing that we can proud of as a nation.
Yes.
Again, thank you very much, Pak Bob, for
You.
in exciting 2 hours of talk. biasanya kita cuma sejam loh ini,
Uh,
gara-gara Pak Bob
well, you
selalu
can break it
exciting
down,
for.
right? You can break it down to two podcasts, right?
Well, I mean,
So
right for now, I don't want to cut it. I'll just put it in about 2 hours. Let the listeners listen. So I'll probably make some timestamps of some sort, but we'll see. Okay.
okay.
Yep. Thank you very much, Bob, for the for this being the guest as wonderful as you are. And untuk pendengar semuanya, sampai jumpa di episode selanjutnya. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.